for some reason it was showing 7:30 a.m., not 8:30 a.m. when I just went to log in just now. Um, I kind of pulled in, looked up earlier, and I saw some people waiting. And I thought, oh, they're all here early, and went about my business and getting ready and everything else. And then when I went to sign in, I saw it said 7:30 instead of 8:30 for some reason. Anyway, I hope everybody had a great week. Forgive my poking and doing stuff here. I'm still getting used to this, doing the live stream stuff and just use the phone. Hopefully, everybody had a great week in the markets. Again, another really good week. Obviously, after Trump won, we saw the market shoot up a bunch, especially the ones that, the companies that people think are Trump trades and Trump related ones like Tesla was really strong, Coinbase, and then a new elephant in the room that I'll call it because I'll discuss Nextera Energy Partners if anybody wants to a little bit. Um, but boy, Bitcoin. I don't know if anybody keeps an eye on it and pays attention, but Bitcoin actually breached $80,000 late last night or early this morning, depending on what time zone you're in and where you're at. Pretty amazing to see. And, let me give my little disclaimer like I always do. Please, this is not financial advice. Please use anything I talk about as entertainment purposes only, and you guys do your own research and reach out to your financial advisors for the investment decisions you make, especially when I talk about things like Bitcoin, because it's very hard to know what it'll do. But with what they've said after the election and what the administration has indicate from the Trump team, they're probably going to put in a crypto division and start investigating the value of owning Bitcoin as part of our national reserve. If that happens, it's hard to imagine that we don't see it continue higher. It's very hard for me to picture a scenario where they're working on building this committee, making that part of our reserve, and the Bitcoin not continuing higher. At the same time, it's really hard for me to pay $80,000 a token because it seems like it's high already. It's just if it becomes part of our reserve and the US government starts buying it, I mean, their funds are so big and their ability to invest is such a big number that it's hard to imagine how high it'll go. And I don't want to make any prediction, but it really does seem like 100,000 is not very unlikely at this point. We're only 20% away. I would be shocked if it made it there this year, but I wouldn't be overly shocked, like it totally blows me out of the water. Um, my concern with doing something like that is it gives the committee a little bit a little too much power to be able to do whatever they want in terms of crypto without breaking any laws. I don't think there's anything illegal about front running the market, and I'm not thrilled at that concept. Um, I don't know. What do you guys think? Any of you paying attention to Bitcoin right now, or any of the other current cryptocurrencies? I mean, I know Ethereum seems to be doing well, and Solana looked like it was moving up. I think it was over 200 last I looked. And again, I think that stuff continues. It's becoming more accepted that crypto is a legitimate thing that will exist. It's funny when I listen to Peter Schiff and how negative he is on it. And, I really like Peter Schiff. I don't know if you guys watch him from time to time too. He's just pretty negative on certain things and obviously a bit of a gold bug. And I'm not sure if that's because that's what he's selling or if it's got to be his real belief as well. I'm sure because he's invested in it. And from what I understand, he's buying the gold companies more than physical gold. Um, but either way, he talks about it a lot. And what I found interesting when he talks about the negatives of Bitcoin and what he doesn't understand of it is then he'll talk about, he would understand if they had a gold crypto. And I think that's kind of funny. Um, hey, Dan, how are you? Hope you're doing well. Yeah, I said earlier, like, I think I screwed up. Like, I meant for 8:30. I don't know why it said 7:30. I'm sure it said 7:30 because I put that in, but that was a total mistake. I was always thinking 8:30 and I actually saw people waiting, and then when I went to actually log in, I saw that it said 7:30 and I was like, "Oh." crap and recognized the error I made. So I apologize about that. But I intended for 8:30, and if I'm able to do it again next week, I'll also aim for 8:30. So if I make the same error, I apologize. Hopefully, it just was stupidity and not like me not understanding something. Um, so e- Either way, I like. Sorry, I think I was talking about crypto, and then I still picture it going higher. Oh, Peter Schiff, and that he's quite a gold bug, and he talked about like doing a gold crypto. I don't understand how he doesn't see that's no different than Bitcoin, because what he says about Bitcoin is it's not real. Nothing really exists. But if you did a gold cryptocurrency, and it didn't really have physical gold, it's just as silly if I were him, since I believe in cryptocurrency. But if you don't believe in cryptocurrency, why would you believe in a crypto gold token? Like, what would it be based on? The price of gold? If it's not really gold, it's no different a crypto coin than anything else. Either way, I, I really believe in this stuff, and I think it is the future. I do think that Bitcoin will continue to go higher. I guess we'll see. And with the way that the administration's going, where they're really pro crypto, I, I don't know how high it's going to go, but it seems like it could have, like Michael saying, and all of them could be accurate with how much room it really has. Oop, did it work? You there, guys? Sorry, I'm so sorry. I don't know why it disconnected. Yeah, we lost me. All of a sudden, it said disconnected. Um, anyway, so I think it continues. I think if it becomes part of our Federal Reserve money, because then there's even a benefit to our government actually having the prices go higher on top of it. So I also think its ability to see where people are spending and everything else, it becomes a larger part of our economy and everything in terms of where we're going for the future. I did want to talk a little bit about NEP, because I know it was a stock that I talked about for a while, and I was telling everybody how much I loved it, and I actually even talked with the company. And one of the reasons I always say, do your own research and everything else, is it's very hard for me to let everybody know what I'm doing with something. And as I started really trying to focus more on moving my stock accounts to being just invested in what I saw as the best companies, I assume I'm back because I see some of the chat and I see things beginning to work again. So hopefully you guys are able to see me now. Sorry that it cut out. Um, but as I've started trying to rotate into my just top stocks, and I still haven't been able to, and I still own some of NEP, I did limit down the size of the position I had. Yeah, I was talking about Bitcoin not too long ago, Parka. I limited the size of the position because I had gotten so large a position in it that I shouldn't have done that anyway. Now, I don't know if I've made money or lost money. I was fortunate to sell some of it when it was a little bit better, but I've also sold some of it when it was a little bit worse. Um, but hopefully, those of you who own NEP, you kind of have a position like I do now, that it's not such a big position that anybody's too concerned either way, which way it goes or not. They've still been able to pay the dividend, but they have a few things that are going on that has been impacting their share price. First of all, they missed earnings, and if I remember correctly, they actually had a loss, which is obviously not a good thing. The other problems are, if inflation is going to be higher for longer, which it sure seems that way, even though the Fed's cutting rates. I mean, one of the things I've noticed, and I think it'll continue, is the yield curve is uninverting. Now, I've been talking about that for a while. I'm not sure if people have questions about it. Um, if you do, let me know. I'll walk everybody through that and explain what I mean and why I think it's happening. But as the yield curve goes back to normalizing, if you're a company like NEP that borrows a lot of money, it's possible that your borrowing expenses are going to stay higher than you've really factored for. Maybe they anticipated a little bit more of a friendly environment to be able to borrow going forward. And since they're really intensive in terms of how much money they need to borrow against what they're investing in, that could impact their ability to pay the dividends. The other thing is, my guess is now, look, all of this, none of this is political. It really is just talking my opinion on the markets. So if I talk about Trump or Harris or whomever, it has nothing to do with any opinion about any of them. But my guess is based on his history is Trump is not as caring towards solar and wind and renewable energy. That may turn out not to be accurate, but my guess is some of the stimulus and some of the grants and some of the other stuff that are offered currently may not be on the table so much. Now, it might be. I mean, we need energy in all forms, which is why they're pushing for nuclear and everything else. So maybe NEP gets some grants or things to really help it. But I think all of those things are what's weighing on the stock. What I have left at this point, I don't really think I'm going to make any changes on, but I would be cautious and I hope nobody has a huge position in it at this point. Um, Now, in terms of my friend asking when am I going to enter the bear game, I don't see a bear market coming anytime soon, unless you're talking about the football team. I think that um, I think that the economy is strong. I think the news makes it sound scary, and I think a lot of the doom and gloomers give terrible advice. Because really, my goal, like even if the market did correct, my goal would still be to encourage people to save for their future, and I would encourage them to be putting away whether they think the market's too high or too low. And if it starts dropping, unless somebody's in a position where they've lost their job and they don't have income coming in, I would rather see them buying more of whatever it is they're investing in than not buying because they're waiting for some big correction to come. And I would rather see, like, I tend to have very little cash on the sideline. I have some just because what if, but I want to be covered for time frame. But I want to be invested because I really believe in that phrase. It's more important about the time you're in the market than timing the market. Um, I think it's super important. And if those of you have heard my story about McDonald's and the other ones, maybe I'll ramble through it. Well, I'll just give the synopsis. I was fortunate enough to be given a little bit of money when I was really young, and I think I was a junior in high school, so it was 1989, and I bought 4 stocks, 5 stocks actually. 4 of them don't even exist anymore, so they went bankrupt. And one of them was McDonald's, which was already, McDonald's. You had the stories of people who had made $1 million on $1,000 investment. Well, the $2,300 that I put in McDonald's, that if I still had today, now I don't have the full position, but if I did, would be about a $250,000 from a $2,300 investment. The point is, the time in the market, which was close to 40 years, is really what was important because during that time, McDonald's fell in half 3 or 4 times. It's just that it's been slow and steady and continues going higher. Um, Now, one of the other ones that I've talked about recently that I wanted to address as well was Boeing, because I know Boeing's been struggling too, but I think they're finally past all their hurdles. Maybe I'm wrong on it. I would be cautious, but I think that they're a really good company. And I think at this point, they've finished with the strike. They've sold off enough stock to eat in some of their debt. And now they can focus on going back to work and building planes and getting them sold. And my guess is they won't be in the news so much because unless we have another plane crash, which God forbid, let's hope not, there's really no reason now for them to be in the media too much. And if they're not in the news for all the negative that was going on, I think that creates the opportunity to selling kind of stop and it'll start drifting higher. So I guess we'll see. I mean, I do have a decent sized position in Boeing, and part of what I've been working on, I don't know if you guys work on, is limiting the amount of shares or the amount of companies that I'm holding and really focusing on the top ones. I've even written myself down my list, and I don't know what you guys think. Give some likes. Oh, thank you. That's nice of you, Dan. And then, you know, Vinay, I'm not sure your real name, but what are my thoughts about algos? Um, we talked about that a little last week. That I think AI in the future, that it's not just algorithms; it'll be a lot of things. Will replace a lot of jobs, but I don't think it's gonna take over trading. I think that a lot of the traders already use systems in place where it helps them to analyze things, but I don't think it's going to go straight to algorithms because I think that would really just end up causing a problem because the algorithms would start to recognize if they just run the markets in every direction, the humans would panic and you just see these huge ups and downs and it would make no sense, and eventually a human would have to take over. And Eric, feel free to go right ahead, but you're probably going to taste your screen more than anything else. But that's cool. I would aim for higher up just because I don't want my forehead all wet. But that's my thought on the algorithms. I think if there's too many of them running at the same time, that they're really going to end up having a tough time and not doing as well as one would think, because if it's all just algorithms, they're just going to run everything in every direction. I think you need some human element to make it work right. Um, let's see. I know I missed some, so forgive me while I and Benet, yeah, Trump does support crypto. I think that is why we're seeing it run up the way it is. And it's kind of why I said I'm curious if it's a buy the rumor, sell the news, where it'll run up until he actually gets in office. But I think it keeps running, especially if they have that committee that actually gets crypto and puts Bitcoin as part of our national reserves. Like it's just hard for me to imagine it doesn't. So, anyway, in my top companies, and this is where I want to kind of focus my accounts, um, I have Meta, Amazon, Google, Starbucks, Intuitive Surgical, Apple, Palo Alto Networks, CrowdStrike, NVIDIA, Boeing, Microsoft, Nextera Energy, which is different than Nextera Energy Partners, Cisco Systems, which I'm sure people kind of think it's a dead stock, but that's probably what I like about it. Chevron, Caterpillar, and Target. And those are the ones I really want to try to move towards having, you know, 80 or 90% of my investments in. I don't, and it's been hard to transition out of the ones like you get attached to them. But I still have a bunch of ones that I kind of look at and think, why do I hold on to them? Uh, even last week I was talking about Portillo's, which I think is a great company, and I think will do so really well. And Ricky and Clyde, there are a lot of good companies out there. I think my the trouble, I don't know enough about Palantir. I don't understand it enough. I think SoFi is a great company, and it was one of the ones that I'm trying to transition out of a bit. Not because I don't think these aren't good companies. It's that if I just focus on the ones that I believe in, when they have down moves, I'm much more comfortable with them. I started on really just if I stay with the companies I think are great companies, if they correct and when they correct, because all companies do. I tend to be okay with it a little bit more because I think it's a good company again. And yeah, Rick, you too. It looks like you got under eight. Um, I think that's the best way to outperform the market. It may not be the best way to invest, and you're going to have bigger ups and downs. But if your goal is to outperform the S&P or the Qs or whatever your target is, I think you have to become a little bit pointy because the further your reach is, eventually you're just going to have enough stocks that you're performing as the market is, which is what I end up doing. And then even like one of the ones I still have are two that have done really well. I have Coinbase and I have Shopify even in my account that's like what I think of as a set it and forget it account. But I feel like why even bother with those? If I just stick with what I would call the Amazons, I'll do well. I should outperform, and I won't lose sleep at night, even if I limit the number of shares. Um, let's see. In 2020, I invested heavily in lead. I saw the toilet paper go and knew the bullets were next. Uh, yeah, I would think so too. I mean, and I think similar with a lot of the things that are running now. Like, I think we'll see. the quote unquote Trump trades, I think they'll continue, unless it's ones that were just knee jerk reactions. But I think oil and gas is probably a good sector to be in. I think the crypto space is probably a good section to be in. There's just certain ones that I think they're going to continue to get benefits. And, think of like Tesla running and Elon Trump's companies that they've become really good friends. He's going to have a say as to what's going on in terms of regulations. It's hard to imagine that it's not going to be something that Tesla and probably SpaceX or whomever get some benefits from, because he actually will have some say on it. And if Elon Musk is actually able to have a committee that is investigating how much we're overspending and do a better job at managing the budget for the government, I I imagine a scenario where we see some better fiscal responsibility, and it actually could really help us grow as a country and really improve things. I interned when I was a kid at I went around the Senate and just found somebody who would hire me to intern back when I was in college, and it was interesting. Like, there were some really cool things, but there were some real negative things too. Which is, when it came to the end of your year, when the budgets were up, if somebody was running short on their budget, they would start throwing stuff away to make sure they used up their entire budget. Because if they didn't use up their entire budget, they were liable to get their budget cut, and they couldn't ask for a larger budget for the next year. There's got to be a way to reward the people that are fiscally responsible, or even potentially have ways to drive revenue and help grow the economy, versus we need to use up our entire budget because then I can't get more money for next year. And if business people go in and they're actually able to accomplish that, which is a huge task. I mean, running the government is a much bigger entity than running a company, even if it's Tesla or some of these rather large companies. So it's hard to envision whether they could actually get it done or not. But even the fact that they're going to attempt to is pretty cool. So I think it would be great if they're able to actually accomplish that. Um, and if that drives savings, it should be able to drive growth at the same time, because then they can start focusing on spending on the things that really grow our economy. Um, and it looks like, so you'd short international, their buses and semi trucks. Oh, and Tesla. I would short semi trucks. And you like Tesla. Yeah, I do too. I mean, I think Elon Musk, whether you like him or not, because to be perfectly honest, I don't really like him all that much, but he's really accomplished a ton. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing how much he knows about a lot of things that aren't even his primary business. The guy's a really smart guy. And while it's hard to envision exactly how the robo taxis, I mean, like, I'm sure we can all picture it, but it's hard to imagine if he can really pull it off. And it seems like a lot of the investors, and I mean the institutions, seem to think so. Um, why am I so? Hey, bro, give me $1,000. Okay, just keep waiting for it. It's probably right outside the door, is my guess. So you may want to look. But assuming you're asking me, maybe one of the other people in the chat too. Pretty cool. Um, but I love Tesla. I love that he controls every aspect of the company. He's not just selling vehicles. It's very hard to go somewhere else to have service done. You have to be licensed as a Tesla technician to work on Tesla vehicles. And if you don't use Tesla parts, you void the warranties, which is something that doesn't happen with Ford and GM and the others. Like, there's lots of other companies that sell the parts. On top of that, they've gotten to a position where, we all recognize they have the charging station, so they're almost like the car manufacturer, the repair facility, and the gas station. But I think a lot of people don't even realize at this point they sell auto insurance as well. And not only are they selling the insurance, it's much less expensive if you than if you go to, Progressive or one of the others, they're significantly more expensive. So he's controlling every aspect of this company. And I think even when I think into selling the insurance, it's pretty cool that he knows his costs, like really knows them, and not just what it costs to pay somebody else. Um, and whether one thinks that Ferrari and Lambo are far better than Tesla, I'm not talking about the car itself. The ease of use is part of the allure of Tesla. We bought in 2014, and my mom wanted to cut my head off, essentially saying, new technology that nobody knows anything about to spend. Back then they only had the S and I think it was only the S actually when I bought it. They hadn't even come out with the 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 Y, the X, whatever the next one was, but the SUV. But from 2014, it was literally about a month from now, so almost exactly 10 years. We haven't even spent $500 in repairs. Now, the only thing that's untrue about that is we did have to spend $1,100 to replace the screen. But 2 years later, I got a letter in the mail that they determined that that was a manufacturer's error, and they actually sent us a check to reimburse us for that. Outside of that, they had to fix the door once, and they did that remotely, like, they did it online somehow. The handle wasn't opening up quite right, and that cost, like, 130 or $140, and then there was some, plastic piece that came off around the tire, and they estimated, like, 150, and it cost $80. Those are the only 2 actual repairs we've had to do to the car. Otherwise, no oil changes, no timing belts. Obviously, we've changed tires and windshield wipers, but that's it. We haven't even had to replace brakes because with the regenerative braking, the reality is you don't even use the brakes most of the time. It's only if something catches you off guard. Um, so for me, when I look at Teslas, even if there are other cars I like more, not because it's electric, but it's like plug and play. Like it's so easy to use. And then we ended up getting solar in the house so that we're not even really paying for the gas anymore. Now, obviously, I had to pay for the solar, but it's amazing. Um, I don't know when Tesla will be available in India. I'm not familiar with too much of their international fairings. The other thing is with the tariffs that we might have going forward, I think it's going to make it a lot tougher on a company like BYD that's able to produce them at a lower price point. Um, Actually, when we were traveling, I was able to visit a showroom, and I was surprised it wasn't as inexpensive as the media's made it out to seem. The cars look nice, but I still would think it to me, Tesla's nicer, and when you add in the infrastructure that we already have for the charging stations, the few times that you actually might travel across country, it really makes a big difference. Um, so I don't know, what do you guys think of Tesla? Do you like them? Do you think other things are better? Do you think it continues with Trump in the office? Do you think that they slow down and they've just gotten ahead of themselves? Um, what do you mean not before the roads get fixed? Meaning, because they're constructing on them? Um, because at least, I mean, it's different here in Vegas. The roads are like they're super simple. They just kind of go straight. It's like the square pattern. We have the highway that goes around for it. But for the most part, our roads are just kind of straight and 40 miles an hour. Oh, in India, yeah, the roads are bad. No problem. I don't mind addressing all of them. I'd like to visit. We love to travel, and India is one of those places on our list that we'd like to go. Um, Maybe they need the more of the SUVs, depending on when the roads are bad. As long as some of his vehicles actually recognize the bumps and the this and the that, and the cars are able to adjust. Um, it really is amazing what they're able to do. It's pretty cool. Um, and then if you're curious, what I still think is inexpensive. I love Boeing down here around $150 a share, and I think Google is super reasonably priced, even up at 180 after their last earnings. I think that's about where they closed on at the end of the week. Um, Google had the overhang of the Department of Justice and people worried about that ChatGPT is going to take over a lot of the search. Um, I don't think that's going to be true. Just my opinion here. I think as things move along, um, let's see, used Tesla 2021 Model 3 less than half the cost of 20. Yeah, that's what I think. I mean, I get it, Clyde. Like people like Porsche and some of the other ones, and I think that um, I think that Mercedes makes a better car. Like the lines are always a little bit better. It just feel, but in terms of ownership, I would way rather the Tesla. It just makes a lot more sense. And not only that, if you look at the new ones, if you're getting the tax credit for it, they're really reasonably priced. And why am I so tetchy? Sorry, I don't know your name, but I live in Las Vegas currently. I grew up in New York, so and then I lived in Chicago where I was a commodities trader for I don't know. I lived in Chicago 10 or 11 years, I think, um, which was a nice city, just super cold. And now that I'm in Vegas, uh, uh, I couldn't be happier. It's not as hot as people think. I think the Porsche 911 is pretty cool too. Um, so Google had the Department of Justice overhang, and with ChatGPT cutting into their search, what I really think is as things move along, since most of us, like I tell my son, go look on Google. I don't think to tell him go check on ChatGPT. And I think as Gemini becomes better, because to be quite honest, Google has some of the best engineers there are, and they invest heavily in their staff. I'm guessing that Gemini will continue to improve, and since we're all used to using Google already, that'll continue to be the case. And then, as you guys know, they have all the ancillary businesses, including YouTube, which I obviously I'm here. I love YouTube. I think it's a great. Not only am I doing content, but I'm going to move this down a little bit. Sorry, but I also watch other people too. I talked about it last week. I watched Joseph Carlson. I love his channel, and then Ryan Williams, Ryan Ryne, like Ryan Sandberg, the baseball player. Um, Not Ryan. I think he has a good, and I think Russ Dapper Dividends has a good channel too. Like, there's a whole lot of people that I like their channels as well. And the funny thing is, even the ones who I totally disagree with a lot of the things they talk about, I shouldn't say everything because it isn't everything. I find a lot of them entertaining too, especially the real estate ones that have been gloom and doom for the past 3 or 4 years. Like, part of me thinks that they're doom and gloom because it gets clicks and grows the channel. I don't, it's hard for me to believe that they still believe that at this point. But to be fair to them, the prices are high, the rates are high. Maybe we do see a correction coming down, but they've been talking about it for 3 years and that hasn't happened. And if we do have a correction, I'm not predicting some 2008. I just think we could have a 5 or 10% correction in housing prices. The funny thing is, I don't actually think we will. I think people are going to continue to shake their heads and be stunned that in the places where the prices are continuing higher, similar to the stock market, they probably continue. And then there'll be places across the country that isn't the case. Like Florida has some Florida specific things going on that they could have a correction between the hurricanes that they just had, so the damages, on top of the insurance prices going through the roof and a lot of the insurance companies pulling out. I do see that as a legitimate problem because the expenses are going up. Then you add into it the condo problems where they're getting reevaluated about their budgets and new laws were put in place that they have to maintain a certain amount of money in their accounts to make sure that if something comes along, they can afford to fix it. It's causing some huge HOA special assessments on properties that the price doesn't even make sense. Where I was reading one article where the condo was worth about $250,000, and the special assessment was 100 or $125,000. I mean, imagine owning a property that's worth 200 to $300,000 and getting a special assessment that's about 33% of the value of your condo. Period. Like, I'm sure that a lot of people living in those homes or developments can't even afford the assessment. And if they don't have a way to spread it out over time or make it affordable, and even then some of the people can't afford it, I do think you could see a rather large correction in a place like Florida. But if you're looking at Las Vegas, and what kills me about it, I think Florida is a great place to be. I just think all these problems coming all at once could cause them some real downturn. And that's right. That old chum mentioned, not to mention the structural inspection costs, because from what I read, there's not a whole lot of companies that do it, and they've made it really expensive to do the inspection on them. So I could see that. At the same time, I don't really see that happening in Las Vegas. We're still having more people move here every month than are leaving. We have a lot of people who come from California because their taxes, the cost of housing there is still significantly higher than here, and it's a much easier lifestyle here. Now, it would be nice to have the beach, so I'd love to be able to go over, and drive down and go have some waves and hang out with my family. But outside of that, we have less traffic, and it's so much easier living out here. Depending on what a person's job is, though, we might not have the job options that they do, but I understand why a lot of people end up moving here. What indicator or event would make you think the market trend has changed to a bear market? I really think the the only thing, it's hard, you can't predict what the surprise thing is going to be. I'm more looking to see if we have a continued melt up. And what I look for isn't what most people do. What I look for is when I'm going places and people who don't talk about markets are talking about the markets. So I'm not sure how old you are when you asked the question. Let me see who it was. Duke. But I think back to the internet bubble. And when that was going on back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was living in Chicago in a high rise. And so were my friends at different ones all nearby, so we'd walk, say hello. When I would go and say hello or when I would come home, the doorman would be talking about the internet stock he was buying and asking me what I thought because he knew I was a trader and was curious. Same with when I would get into a cab and they didn't know what I did. It was just kind of conversation. Or I don't know, everywhere you go out to dinner and the waiter or waitress or whomever it is makes some comment about the markets. Those are the indicators I look for. It was the same thing the first time Bitcoin ran up to, I think, $60,000. Like, I remember specifically going to a friend's Super Bowl party, and half of the people there were talking about. I think back then it was Shibu Inu, when Elon Musk and his team were talking about it, but their Dogecoin and their Shibu and their other stuff, like, it just got to a point that all the murmurs, it was people coming out of the woodwork to invest who typically don't invest. Outside of that, I think if one of the wars erupts and got worse, if nuclear was dropped or something else, it would have to be that aspect. But I don't think it's anything in terms of interest rates or thing. I think it's more of an emotional thing. So I keep an eye out to see when people outside of the ones who watch all the time anyway start talking about the markets more. AI could be the thing. If I start hearing, if I get an Uber now, since it's not taxi cabs, and the Uber driver is talking about their AI investment, and not just a one off, but continual, or if we go down to the casino and the reception person is as well. It just, once it gets to that level of people talking about the markets, that's where I think we've run too far, and I look for a correction. Right now, most of the conversation is disbelief. Most of the time when I hear talking about people talking about markets, it's gone too far. It's cautionary, which is why I kind of still feel like it's going to continue. It's not about the earnings. Now the earnings are coming in great, which is all part of it. But most people are nervous to be investing here, and they're keeping cash on the sidelines, waiting for the housing market correction, waiting for the stock market correction, waiting for Bitcoin to get back to whatever number they think it's going to get to. That's why I kind of don't think it's coming. And I think as they keep getting these datas that nothing's really bad, I think the markets keep going. Let's see. Sorry, let me get caught up a little bit and see if there's any real questions. He would eat bulls and bears if all could eat buffet. I do eat buffets. I definitely do. I've gotten away from them because the food's usually not so great, and I would rather order something that is great. But I hate to admit, as you see, buffets are something I do enjoy. Californians drive horrible. They're ruining Texas. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's amazing how many times I get caught off and I cut off and when I'm driving and I notice a California plate and think, really? People in Vegas when I moved here originally, sorry to get off topic a little, they were it is changing, and I don't know if that's Californians or just everyone, but they were so laid back. Driving was really nice. Now I moved, like I said, I grew up in New York and then Chicago, so I was used to much more aggressive driving, but I acclimated really quickly that it was so it first of all, they all drove the speed limit, maybe a couple of miles over. Now that has changed. But if your lane is ending or whatever else, they were really kind about letting people in. Like nobody was it was a different place. And as people are coming in, which is great for the economy and it's great for the housing market and some other things, I have noticed that the driving has changed quite a bit over the years. Um, just have them leave their politics. Okay. You know what? Interesting old chum, because I said that too. Now, again, I'm not real political, but I don't love in California. And we have like my wife's family is out there, so we'll visit. And I don't love what I've seen happen. And even her cousin who lives in San Francisco says she can't even go to the supermarkets anymore. And not because she thinks it's unsafe. She said it's gotten so annoying. She's like, they lock up everything. She's like, if I go and I want a thing of milk, I need to ask somebody to unlock the thing to get me a thing of milk, and it takes me an hour and a half to go shopping. So now she has everything delivered. And I think that is all based on their politics and how things have changed. And I would hate for them to bring that here. But my buddy who watches all that stuff, he said he's been keeping an eye, and something like 2 out of 3 people who have moved here are right wing, not left wing again, which would indicate that they're probably not going to change the voting or the laws here because I do kind of like that it's still a nice place to live and we don't have some of those problems that California seems to have, but we don't have their population either. So I guess we'll see in time. And yeah, Clyde, I totally agree. No IPOs for years, no bubbles. I think so too, and I think we might start seeing IPOs sometime soon. Um, and I hate to admit, in some ways, I'm hoping for the. It's why I keep waiting for the melt up. And same timeline when I was working at the exchange. It was years of the market going higher every day. I mean, even when Greenspan did the irrational exuberance speech, I think that was 2 or 3 or 4 years prior to the market top. I remember whether the stock market, so they traded futures downstairs for the equities, the S&P 500, and I was in the currency markets upstairs. But every day I would watch, and whether the S&Ps opened lower by the end of the day, even if it was like just a tiny bit, they were higher, and this tended to go on for like months and years and on and on. It was really an amazing run. I'm half hoping we have it again, other than the big ups and downs are not great. I mean, I guess it would be better if we just kept chugging along. but I am keeping an eye to see if we have a melt up. And I think IPOs will be a lot of it too, because if everybody remembers, or I'm kind of old, back when the internet bubble was happening, oh my God, anything that came out with a .com in their name, it would open up at, I don't know, $12 a share, and by the close it was at like 25 or 30. It was just totally crazy. I'm waiting for RBI, sure that's a bank to regulate. Yeah, I think a lot of the banks are going to start regulating it more, especially if we really implement Bitcoin into our national reserve, which it sounds like we're probably going to do. Uber driver talking to himself. Uber's an interesting one. Yeah, that's right. Climb the wall of worry. That's what I think for sure. Are mortgage rates coming down? Not right now, they're not. They might in time, and I'll explain that and why not really quickly, which is the Federal Reserve, when they cut rates, it's the overnight lending rate, which is what they call it, which is where banks borrow and lend to each other literally overnight. So you have the front end of the curve, which is the overnight lending, 3 month, 6 month, um, 1 year and 2 year treasuries, and they're going to be the most sensitive to the overnight lending rates. As you get out to like 10-year and 30-year rates, they may or may not, and they tend to move in the same direction, but they may move more, they may move less, and they may actually move in the opposite direction. Well, when the Fed raised rates as quickly as they did, the 10-year did not go up nearly as fast as the front end did. And it's kind of hung there ever since things kind of petered out and they really got super restrictive. As the Fed is, sorry, you don't see my other hand, as the Fed is cutting rates back down, the 10-year really, like, that's, you're seeing the yield go back to being a normal type of yield. And as the Fed continues to cut, I think that continues. So you might see the 10-year come down, but at a lot slower rate than where the Fed's cutting, which means that mortgage rates, even if they come down, aren't going to come down as much as people think. My guess is we'll see them stay in the range that they've been in, which is, mid sixes to low sevens. When the bonds sell off and the yields in the 10-year shoot up to 4.5 or so, I'm seeing rates kind of get into the low sevens. And when people start buying the bonds back and you see the 10-year fall below 4 and maybe into the mid or high threes, I've seen rates get into like 6.5 type of range. Now, depending on, you'd have to check around and see if they're costs associated with those, and whatever else. That's not a quote, just roughly what I've been seeing. But I don't think we're going to see a huge drop in mortgage rates. And I think the only way we see a huge drop is if the market really falters, and meaning across the country, not in certain areas. If the market really falters, the Fed will stop in, they'll buy mortgage backed securities to support the market. That'll have more impact than them cutting or raising rates. If they start buying the mortgage backed securities and support the market, two things happen. As they buy them, prices can go up, which means rates can go down. And the spread between the 10-year and the mortgages increased a bit as the Fed stopped doing that. I think that margin will come in a bit as well. And if we had a real correction, you could see rates get better. But outside of that, I think people will shake their heads and it'll climb a wall of worry, just like the stock market is. And it all has to do with inflation. If your eggs go from, 50 cents an egg to $1 an egg, people don't understand it because a house is much more expensive, but a house would go from 150,000 to 300,000. Inflation works its way through everything in the same way. It's not like, oh, because it's a house, it won't go up as much. Is there a minimum or maximum holding period for a return for? No, no, chart Vishlek. There really is no minimum or maximum. It depends on whether you're trading or investing, which people have a difficult time telling the difference between. I tend to be a little bit too short term. I keep separate accounts because of that. I want to invest in companies, and I want to leave my money there for 5 or 10 years or longer, because I know if I pick great companies, Some might not do so well, but the ones that do well will do really well, and you'll be very surprised over 20 years how well an investment is done. At the same time, since my background was trading currencies and I was in and out of trades sometimes in seconds, if not minutes, sometimes I would hold it for a half hour or so, but it got me in a habit of trading too much. So I keep a separate account that I will sell weekly options and I will buy things and sell things and get in and out of. But I really separate those two portfolios because I don't want to do that with the other one. I just want to own Amazon in the other one, and kind of the list I went through. And I have some others in there, but I kind of want to just focus on the few. Let's see, not aggressive driving. It's Slim's Dallas. I don't. Sorry, trying to get caught up in the chat. I don't believe the correction is. Yeah, I think so too, old chum. I think the economy looks just fine. And then Duke, yes, I do trade options. Um, if last week's live, I actually went into explanations of, calls versus puts, and then the different Greek letters in them, not just the option themselves. Like there's delta, there's volatility, there's gamma, there's theta, which all are what goes into the pricing of an option. And even how I use them, I will use whether it's sometimes I use weekly options, sometimes monthly, and sometimes I'll even use longer term ones if it's something that I want to make sure I own a year to if I get called on the option that I'm looking at long-term games instead of short-term. Um, I, I tend to sell options, not buy them. Um, Sometimes I'll put on a spread though. Like I've been doing one recently, eh, but it's a stock. Like I don't want this to come across as a recommendation. It's a really volatile stock that it could go either direction. The ticker is SAVA. They've come up with a Alzheimer's drug that they think is really good. At the same time, I think it's the same people who were in charge of the opioid epidemic. Like, I don't know that the people running it are on the up and up, and some things came out that they may have not been giving accurate information in some of their reports. So the stock corrected from, I want to say, like $150 a share down to like 30, but their options trading is really amazing. And I own a little bit of the stock. I sold this January, so January 2025, $55 call, and the stock was trading at 25 at the time. It's at 26 for I think $11. I mean, the volatility is absurd, and I think I did two. The first one was like 11.55, and the other one was 10 something. So my average price is like 10.75. I was then able to buy next year, well, 2 years out, January 2026, $30 call for $15. To me, I don't. So I will look at all the options from time to time. I will check the pricing. I get curious. For me to be able to do that spread, and it only cost, it was like somewhere between $4 and $6 per option, just seems like an incredible opportunity. I'm guessing something is coming out over the next few months. Maybe it's the next stage of their testing. They're supposed to get approved, and maybe that's coming out before the end of the year or early January, which is why the ones in January seem so pricey. Even the December ones were. But for me to be able to buy out a less expensive call or a lower strike price was really interesting. Um, 10-year 10-year Treasury aneurysm bond guarantee. Yeah, yeah. Trades Buffett content all day. Who trades Buffett content all day? I actually, it's funny. I sometimes like I had bought Ulta Beauty because I thought it was inexpensive. I also think Lululemon was inexpensive. When it came out that Buffett had bought it and the thing shot up, I actually got out because I think it's a mistake that a company gets ahead of itself because of who buys or sells it. Their earnings are going to be their earnings. a stock's valuation will eventually make sense in terms of their growth and earnings and everything else. And when they get out of alignment, either it takes time and they get back into alignment, or eventually some news comes out as to what's going on, and all of a sudden it makes sense why a stock is too high or too low. I find that to be common. Like a stock is having good earnings, but the share price, it concerns me on Pfizer, which is a position I have. I've noticed every time they report quarterly earnings, they've been getting better and better, but the stock only rallies on the day of the earnings and then it starts selling off to make new lows or start pushing the bottom of the trend. That's bothersome to me, mainly because if the earnings are good and it's continuing to grow, why isn't the share price going up with it? Because it should. And if it's not, what does somebody know that I don't? Now, it could just be a trade and it could normalize, which was what I had just said, but it could be that in another 6 months, something comes out that the insiders were aware of, or there could be some government bill that helps their competitor and not them, or whatever it is, that all of a sudden now that lower price point starts to make more sense. And it's like, oh, geez, no wonder it wasn't doing what the stocks were before or what the earnings were. I've only been around only from COVID debt. I only used to trade breakouts. I still advise others to do so, but I myself have moved to index. Yeah, I did a whole video on if one wants to be diversified and invested at the same time. As far as I'm concerned, if they bought the SPY and QQQ, you've just bought the 500 S&P stocks and the 100 Nasdaq stocks. You don't really need a whole lot more in a portfolio. I mean, sure, there's SCHD and VU and this one and that one, but I think once you've bought the S&P 500, I mean, I don't even know that you need to do much more than that. I think index investing is a great idea. I don't know about the options. I think that gets a little aggressive. But going into an ETF and just kind of being well diversified is a great idea. I just personally, I like picking stocks and I like feeling like I'm invested in the companies I pick. And I try to actually ignore valuation to some degree. You know, Costco's one that I think Costco is exceptionally overpriced. I also think they're a great company. I haven't owned it for a really long time. I finally sucked it up and bought a really small position so that at least I own it, because I think owning the best companies will work itself out. And if it's overpriced, it's overpriced. And if one day it becomes more reasonably priced and nothing has changed in their actual business where I still like the company, it'll create an opportunity to buy more. But so long as they continue to do what they're doing, it's quite possible they'll just be overpriced going forward. Um, the dollar will strengthen considerably. Yeah, I don't know if I think the dollar is going to strengthen considerably. Trump generally likes a weak dollar so that people are buying our goods because their currencies are stronger. And we've run so far. I, I don't know. It's hard for me to picture a currency like the yen continuing to get weaker. Um, it's actually getting to the point where if you travel to Japan, it's not so expensive to go there. Now there are a lot of things going on. They have an aging population. Maybe they won't become as big a piece of the global economy. So maybe it does continue. It's just hard for me to know. Our problems aren't as bad as Europe, and I haven't seen the euro get below parity or 1 to 1. So maybe our dollar continues getting stronger, but even against China, the RMB is almost eight, up to 8 again. I just think things are getting a little stretched. I don't know that it'll be tough for that to continue before putting a lot of pressure on some other countries where they start buying their own currencies to support them. And Duke, I love the wheel strategy. It just depends on the company I'm trading. Right now I do that with Target and Boeing. I have Boeing in my set it and forget it account, and same with Target. But I totally I sell puts, and as they get filled, I'll sell calls against it, and I just continue to do that and move up or down with the stock. And at least currently, it's been working out really well. And they're both companies I don't mind holding, so I have no problem when I'm getting assigned positions to them. I just try to make sure that there's plenty of money in the accounts to be able to afford to do it, because anybody who's done that for some time, a stock can trend in one direction, and you can start getting filled on those puts and lower prices, so it's already working against you. And it's good to have the capital to make sure that's okay. Here's what I think, because it would be my first time a cycle where oh, yeah, I don't look at the reverse repo all that much. I think the federal bank reduction of tax. I think the same thing. So chart visual shack. Boy, I hope that's what it is. I think the Fed bank reduction in rates would bring up fixed interest instruments, driving people towards safer investment ideas. And that's what the big fishes start taking over the market share. Um, I think the if rates stay high and people can get returns, and I think as the Fed cuts, you'll see it normalize more, so that 10 years will look more attractive. And if equities go higher, there will be a point that getting a nice fixed return that you're not super stressed about is probably a good thing to shift into. Oh, okay, chart, no problem. Just select me. Oh, analyst. Oh, so you like charting? That's cool. My brother is a huge chartist too. Um, he was an options trader at the Board of Options Exchange, and he relies heavily on his charting, and he's very good at it. I was always a little bit more instinctual. The way that the currency markets just fly around, um, just went off a gut. Especially, floor trading was super cool, and computers have really taken that away. Um, Working at the exchange is like eh, being in a fraternity for your job. I mean, you have to be really able to joke around with everybody and get along with people, because getting trades, they have to trust you and whatever else. But being on the exchange and seeing the emotions, and you could tell when people were nervous and when it was going well, and you could feel the energy in the pit, was such a huge advantage. And it was such a cool opportunity. It's almost a shame that computers have come around, other than computers are really amazing and have some other aspects. But the floor trading was just such an amazing thing. And the real advantages of the floor was, like anything else, getting to know it. So I traded yen futures. And where I stood in the pit, you start to know who's who in the pit. Well, Mike worked for Smith Barney, Bryce was Morgan Stanley, then you have the JP Morgan guys. Like, you get to know where all the bank traders are, and not just where they are. We're trading the yen against the dollar. The dollar yen, which really moves our market, is being traded over phones and from bank to banks in New York and Tokyo and things like that. So what happens is that market moves and we move the opposite direction. When I would see Bryce from Morgan Stanley start to buy the market, and notice that so was Smith Barney, so was Goldman Sachs, so was the other ones, all you really had to do was pay attention and know who was who, and jump on the bandwagon of what the banks were doing. And this was not a once in a while type of thing. This was on a daily basis. Multiple times a day, you would see them all doing the same things, and you could just kind of jump on board. Seeing it on the computer, it's just numbers, and you don't know who's who. They've even gotten good at hiding who they are, because it used to be like you would know if it was in a multiple of eight, that was the banks, because that was the exact number of what they were getting out. Like, it was eight of our contracts for one of the dollar yen. So they might be buying and selling in any multiple of eight. That isn't the case anymore. The other advantage is, if I was making a price on the floor, let's say the yen, ignoring the first couple of digits, because usually you just would make a price of the last digit. So you might be bidding two, but the market is, I know the yen is somewhere around 65 something something right now. So it might be trading 65.52, but on the floor you're just two. You're two bid at maybe four. And as it moves, everybody's kind of aware where the real market is. Um, One of the other advantages is in that example, let's say it's trading 65.52 and I'm standing there half paying attention, half not. We're just making markets in case orders comes in. If the banks were all of a sudden 5 points lower, they didn't come in and say sold, 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 and make you buy those contracts from you. They would just come in and say now it's at 65.48, and you had the opportunity, like they'd make eye contact. If you really wanted to buy the contracts, you were more than welcome to buy them from them. But if you were just making a market and now the market was lower, it gave you the opportunity to just put your hand down. And they were well aware that you may or may not really want to buy, that you were just making markets for the paper flow. And that was a huge advantage too. Whereas if you're on the computer and you put an order in, if the market gaps a direction, like you're filled, and currencies do gap like that all day long. And while it doesn't sound like a lot, if you're just trying to make a little bit here and there, make a little bit here and there, like the goal of the floor trader is to make as many trades as possible and just make a point or two, or make a point or two all day long. So moving a little bit is a huge disadvantage, and getting filled on the computer like that is terrible. So, do I still trade futures? I've actually gravitated away from trading the futures, and if I want to put a position in the currency market, I do not leverage the way that futures do. So I still have a relationship with the company that I use at the exchange, because I'm sure as shit not going to the bank and paying what they charge to get in and out of a currency. But if I want to buy yen, which I have recently, I'll send the company the money for either the equivalent of what a futures contract is, or they have what are minis now, which is a half a futures or one of those, and they'll actually move it into yen currency for the price of what the exchange is. So I'm not paying two pennies when the market is 0.001 penny wide. It's a really reasonable price. I don't get ripped off from getting in or getting out, but I'm also buying it for a much different reason. Um, I thought it got cheap enough. It's been against me as a trade, but we've talked about spending some time in Japan, and my real attitude was, if the dollar got weaker and the currency went up, well, we have great. I bought it cheap. When we go there, I won't think about what it really is now. And if it gets cheaper, okay, that's okay. I mean, it's cheap enough where I'm content owning some yen to be able to go on vacation there. I just can't stand going to those currency exchange. So when I talk about the price being 65.52, that's like less than 1/100th of a penny. So when you go to the banks and they're charging like 2 cents, 3 cents wide between where they'll buy and sell it, like in my head, that's 200 or 300 points, which is just an absurd ripoff. And I can't stand that. Do I have any ideas on where to make money with $1,000? So I'm not sure if it's an honest question or a joke, but I'll respond because I think it's important. I think investing doesn't matter how much you start with. I think you continue to add, you continue to save your cash, and you continue to put away. If you're asking where can I make $1 million with $1,000, take a trip to Vegas, put it on the whatever you think, and see if you get lucky. But I don't think there's any way to invest $1,000 and get rich. I do think it's a slow, long process of continuing to put away. Makes me kind of old and boring, but it's what I've seen over the years. And I think some things will work out incredibly well, and some things will work out incredibly poorly. But overall, it'll do better than putting your money in a checking account. Um, Sorry, I'm not sure what that says, mutual fund, but I'm happy to answer. I spent 2 years only to understand how to trade session capital. Okay, well, Anyway, I've noticed it's been a little over an hour. There. So it's probably time for me to go before my wife starts looking at me saying, "What are you doing for so long?" But I appreciate the chat. I hope you guys had a nice time. I'm going to try to aim for the same time next week and maybe make it weekly. It was cool seeing more people show up this week. I, hopefully that continues. I really appreciate all of you. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I'd appreciate that too. It's been really cool. Let's see. What do you think of? No, no, no. You can ask your question. I don't mind answering one more. I like the interaction of the live. So, Chart, feel free to go ahead. 1K and Ross start. Yeah, I would totally. And those of you who don't take advantage of a Roth, by all means, the younger you start it, the better. The Roth is such a great tax defer, like no tax at the end. You pay your taxes up front. I love that. But Chart, if you had a question, feel free to ask. I don't mind. I really don't. Like I said, I like the live platform. I think it's super cool to get to interact with everybody. Um, I just noticed I'd gotten caught up and probably time to head out soon, but I don't mind answering one more. So I'll give you a couple seconds. Otherwise, we'll call it a day. So, did you have a question? If not, no worries. All right. Well, feel free if you want to put it into the chat. I can. I can. Oh, there we go. I don't trust. Neither do I. Neither do I. Um, I don't. I don't. I agree 100%. I do not trust fund managers. I'm not a fan of them. I don't think that they're any more educated. Or maybe educated isn't the right word. I don't think they're privy to better information than you and I, and sometimes I think they're getting bad information. So when I was at the exchange, and not to bring it all back, I did their currency blog. It was a written letter, but I was doing it because I was the new guy and I was young and nobody wants to do it. So I think a lot of fund managers, like the information they're getting are to those guys, and sometimes it's manipulated as well. And I don't think they're any better, which is proved by most of the funds don't do any better than the market. I would rather buy the SPY than put it in a fund and trust the manager. And I would rather make my own decisions and not, pay any of the commissions, especially knowing that, back in the 80s, monkeys threw darts at a dartboard with the different stocks, and they did just as well as the market too. So it's really hard to beat the markets. I don't really trust the fund managers either. I think sometimes they make bad decisions to get an extra dividend or whatever it is that they're trying to do to make their fund look the way it does, and it's not necessarily a great financial decision. It's just what works best for them. And Duke, I used to use Thinkorswim just for some charts and stuff. I generally trade on E-Trade, but not for any particular reason. I also have a SoFi account, but same thing. Not mainly. I opened it up there for my son. I think that it's an easy platform for him to be able to see what they're doing on. Anyway, again, have a great day, guys, and I'll see you next week. And I'm sure I'll post again on my normal one on Saturday and some things throughout the week. So thanks for showing up.